Okay, so this meeting was incepted last Friday during after our retro when we were talking about thinking a little bit more about our long-term plans for our team and our stage, making sure that we're not getting caught up in the minutia of small issues, and that even if we're not planning and architecting things for the long term for a year or 2 years down the road, that we're at least considering them. And so we had this idea to meet with some frequency synchronously while we talk about what's in line for the next several milestones. So probably up through like 12.7, 12.8. Thanks, Dan. And then once we have that sort of level setting from there to go beyond that and saying like, okay, now that we all understand what the current plan is that right? Should we be doing something different? Are there other ideas that we should talk about? Are there other plans that we should consider? And as a team, we could move from there. And then once we have that, then these meetings move to more of once a month thing as a check-in, where we say, are we doing the right things? Like if we zoom out from everything that we're doing now, does it seem like we're working on the right things for our team long term? Does that make sense? Okay, cool. So as this is our first meeting, aside from that intro, I thought it would be a good idea to just maybe for today give a high level summary of some of the epics that we've been laying out and defining and how that could impact us. And then ideally we can start by going through the first one here, which is the lower the cost of the container registry by introducing storage management features. And we can go through each of the issues there and discuss. Ian, did I miss anything? No?
No, you did not. Sorry, I lock my computer whenever I try to unmute myself. It's very cumbersome. No, that was it. I think it's really great to make sure that we all have that chance to align on the bigger vision, especially as we can kind of get into the minutia of the individual issues. Just like you were saying, I think it's really great to have everyone part of that conversation as opposed to just a select few.
Cool. All right, so I'm looking at the doc that's included in the meeting invite. So we just kind of talked about the goal and the plan. So how to contribute? We do need to make sure that this meeting works synchronously and asynchronously. So we will do our best to do a good job of making sure that notes get captured here. That if people left a note in the doc, that we read it, we represent their opinion, and we talk about it so that they can go back and watch the recordings and hear what we said. And then another thing that could be done is, reading through these epics, leaving feedback and questions either in the epic or in the issue, and then of course adding questions like I mentioned. Okay,
so sorry to interject, Tim. I would say that if people have feedback on epics, that we should prioritize putting that feedback in the epic itself or in the issue, depending on what it is. And if people have like particular questions about the process, maybe put it in the document. I don't know if that works for everyone, but I just want to, on the front of contributing and making it async, friendly or friendlier async. I think these meetings are super valuable, but let's make sure that we sort of focus into the channels that we generally would use for comms, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that sounds good. This way we have a single source of truth for everything that we're talking about, which would be great. Okay, so these are the four epics. Oh, shoot, I just got it. Okay, there we go. These are the four epics that Ian and I have been working on, and Dan, and they kind of go in priority order, at least in my mind. The first one here is lowering the cost. I mentioned that one. This is the motivation for prioritizing this epic is both for our customers and for our internal use. Currently, the container registry is costing us tens of thousands of dollars a month in storage costs. It's costing our customers not that much, but we have certain customers that have tens of terabytes of data that they're not using, and they don't want that cost, and they don't have a way of managing the storage. Really, for us to scale, the container registry beyond, to the next level, we need to provide these sort of, I would call them table stakes features. We need to provide features to allow people to clean them up. So if you click on the epic, I walk through the problem that we're solving and the goal. So I'll just read through the top 6 goals that I've identified here. So an improved user experience for removing tags from the UI. We've been doing some of that already, actually. Nick has been created multi-select delete. Gigi right now is working on something that fixes a bug where if you delete an image, it deletes, or a tag, it deletes all tags with the same ID. That's a really nasty bug that a lot of people have complained about. Okay, share. Sorry, 1 second. Oh my God. Okay. The next one is an expanded API that allows for bulk removal of images and tags at the group level. So again, this is a big value add for GitLab and for our enterprise customer, or really any customer that has a structure where they're leveraging groups and subgroups. Currently, the bulk removal process only works at the project level. And so if you have many groups, it's very inconvenient to run the process for each project. Something we're working on now, an optimized garbage collection algorithm that can handle terabytes of data without long windows of downtime. And in the issue, I specifically get into that. My goal for the current work planned is that we would, anything less than a terabyte that we could do in a couple of hours. Currently, it's taking, one customer has maybe 10 terabytes and it's taking like 12 hours or something. So they can't set that much downtime. A UI-driven retention and expiration policies for images or tags, same thing. But you know, from the UI, being able to set a policy that will expire images based on what you decide. The ability to expire images from CI and CD, similar to the way that we handle artifacts, where you could say expire in 7 days or expire on merge or something like that. And then automated scheduled garbage collection. And maybe to start, this is only for our customers, and maybe it's not for GitLab.com, but ideally we would get to the point that we could automate that for GitLab.com too. And so the target audience here is the systems administrator. So developers will use this, but as we've done user research and we talk to developers, no offense, Steve or Nico, they tend to say, I don't really think about cleaning up images. I just build them and whatever, you know, I don't really think about it. Whereas the people that are administrating and owning the GitLab platform are thinking about it all the time, because they're looking at the storage growth unbounded, and they really don't feel, they feel powerless because they don't know which images can and can't be deleted. So having policies for them would be really helpful. I made some predictions of the outcome to reduce to yeah, exactly. To reduce the storage cost for the GitLab.com container registry by 20%. I think we could do a lot better than that, but I don't really know what's in there or what we're going to find until we dig into it. And then I think we could do better on behalf of our customers and lower it by 30%. And some important decisions that we made. Our current path is to fork the Docker registry as opposed to building our own or implementing something like Docker Trusted Registry or Harbor. And we did that for a variety of reasons. We didn't integrate with Harbor or Docker Trusted Registry because of concerns about integrating other products into GitLab and the duplication and removal of features. Like, does it make sense to have 2 sets of role-based access control or 2 different databases and things like that? We felt that building our own registry from scratch was risky because of unknown unknowns. We didn't really know what we were going to find. And forking seemed like the most iterative approach that we could take. And it also maintains some possibility of contributing back to the open source project, which would be in line with GitLab's values as well. Although we're not sure if we will absolutely be able to do that. And
I think, sorry, Tim, just to jump in there.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have on the integration front, there's sort of an agreed approach that we ought to be sort of building our own in some capacity to be able to have the features available reflect what our customers need, and also what we need, obviously, because dog fooding, we use this a lot. So I think, there had been some questions about Harbor and possibly other solutions. Docker Trusted Registry is a little bit more extensive of an investment to try and figure out if we can integrate it. And then we still run into the same issue of like, okay, we need this specific thing and how do we get it? And we have to ask for it, kind of thing. Harbor itself implements Docker Distribution Registry, which is exactly what we have, in exactly the same way. And so anything, they have made it a point to continue to use exactly what is deployed from the open source project. And they have managed to get some contributions back into that, but they sort of indicated that it was somewhat difficult. So that's why Tim was sort of saying, well, we're not sure if we'll be able to contribute back, because it just depends if the functionality we add is desirable and if the maintainers of that project accept the change.
Where we talk through the problem to solve and the audience and outcomes and other information, is we line up the issues, and we can use this as sort of a piece of the roadmap, because we could see these line up in specific milestones. Let me move this over. So I mentioned, some of the work that's been happening towards this epic already. We did this, everything that Dan was just talking about, making those decisions. How do we prioritize that? How do we decide to fork? That was all in this, determining the path towards complete for the container registry. For Nico, GitLab, for all of our features, use all of our categories, talk about maturity being minimal, viable, complete, and lovable. And currently, the container registry is in the viable stage, meaning that it can be used, it's adopted, but it's missing key features. So what we were talking about when we all first started was, how do we take the container registry to complete? And a big piece of that was introducing these storage management features, and that's where this epic comes from. We talked about the multi-select delete. We're working on deleting the only selected tags from the container registry now. We recently launched something that a permissions change that allows the predefined variable CI registry user to untag images from CI/CD. Previously, they could only build and push images, publish images. Now they could actually untag them as well. So this is a move in the right direction of being able to automatically untag and remove images from CI.
Yeah, Tim, just to jump in really quick here as well, just for context, Nico, the way it works is the garbage collection that's built in to the container registry only runs when it's in offline or read-only mode. So you have to sort of shut down. This is why it's a concern for some of our customers, the amount of time. So you have to effectively, you can pull images still, but you can't actually, potentially, depending on how you do it, but you can pull images. But the garbage collection process only removes untagged blobs. So the actual binary data is only removed if they're untagged anyway. So if there's no process to untag, then there's no way that a garbage collection will even help clean up necessarily, because it's only untagged items that get removed. And so this is why a lot of this stuff sort of fits together. It's a file system based sort of manifest. So they have a manifest that relates to the blobs, and it's basically file structure. So that's why you can't do it online, because open files and everything won't work properly. So that's all I have. Sorry.
That's an important note. Thank you. As part of the so we added the multi-select delete. We're updating the delete logic. Really is remove untag logic. We need to update the pop-up message. This is a small change, but it's an important one since we changed the overall functionality. And then now we start to get into a little bit more of the meat of this issue. So the first one, and this is generally how I'm trying to approach things in terms of prioritization. So I'm open to feedback on this. I'm generally trying to prioritize an API for a functionality, something that we could launch first for our customers prior to doing anything for the user interface level. And some of that's my background of building APIs and then having the front end consume them. And part of that is just me, another way of introducing functionality without having to worry about how does this fit into the application? How do we make sure that this, that we have the right default set? So an API is a good way of releasing functionality without worrying about some of those things. So this API would be for allowing for bulk removal of tags at the group level. There is something to be said about that, there's another issue that probably should be added to here, which is figuring out how to improve the performance of the bulk removal API. I think that's something that we have planned for 12.4, right, Dan?
Yeah, we have that.
So
I think I sent it to someone the other day. I can grab that and send it to you if you like.
I have it. I just need to add it to, let me just take a note here.
Why don't you continue and I'll do that while you're continuing walking through this.
Okay, cool. At the same time, in that issue, I think another problem that we face is that there's really three different types of, I think it's three. Let me talk through it. It might be more. We have self-managed customers that are using the container registry and they have less than, let's say, 500 gigs of storage that they're using. Those users can run bulk removal of tags. They can run garbage collection with a couple of hours of downtime and clean up their registry. Yet, I get probably like 5 questions for a week from people saying, how do I get rid of some of this storage in my container registry? So I think one feature here that Jason actually recommended is giving users some help to let them know that this feature exists. So maybe some sort of contextual tooltip or documentation in the application that would prompt system administrators to and just alert them that that these features do exist and they can use them. So that would be for self-managed instances. This issue here, Dan, do you think that we should remove this for now, the create fork of Docker distribution registry?
Sorry. It's done. So the fork exists.
Okay.
But that was, remember we discussed turning that more into an epic of like, okay, well, what would it look like to then start working on a fork of Docker distribution registry? And the first step was to actually fork it, and that's done. And there's the link in there for the actual project. Okay,
cool. So I'm going to move that one.
That was going to be a question I had was, is the inline garbage collection considered to be part of this epic, or is that within a different scope?
Yeah, so the issue there was to, that would be a next step from optimizing garbage collection would be to implement online. And I believe that's mistyped because online is what we're talking about, generally speaking. I'm sure, I know Camille intended the same from his thing. So I'm calling it online garbage collection, meaning that the registry is not in read-only or offline mode. But that would be like a next step, because that's kind of the idea that we have is, let's optimize what we have. We can release that to our customers. They can get an improvement in performance. They can clean up more quickly. And then let's start looking at doing online garbage collection. And that'll give us a little bit of a step into working with the Docker distribution registry and the container registry backend. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
I was thinking that might be under a different epic at some point, depending on if if we can optimize the garbage collection code and solve the problems for most of our enterprise customers. Let's say 90% of them can use the optimized code. We probably will have a new epic where we handle online garbage collection, and there might be some other features that go along with it.
Yeah, no problem. Cool. Sorry, that issue that we were talking about, for some reason I wasn't able to add the epic to it. I'm not sure exactly why. So that I've linked it in the chat here.
Okay, yeah, I'll take care of it after the meeting. Oh, you linked it so I could do it. I don't need to pull it up, I don't think. For right now, let's see. I could show you all how to add it to the epic. So you have to add it here.
I was doing it from the other direction because you can do epic, edit the epic on the issue itself, and it was just like, yeah, no.
Yeah, I've never had that work for me actually.
Really? I think
Yeah.
I had that work for me. Maybe I haven't. And I'm just imagining it. Anyway, carry on. Sorry.
Okay, so we're up to we've now alerted users that these features exist. We are optimizing it. So the next pieces are all about retention and expiration policies. So being able to expire images and tags from the container registry using GitLab, the GitLab YAML file, GitLab CI YAML file. We already are doing this for artifacts, which are also handled in a similar way to packages or to images. So I'm not sure what's involved in actually making this happen, but I think this would be a really nice feature, especially if we can alert people, developers and system administrators that it exists. Then assuming, and this one's a little bit more tricky, allow users to run and schedule garbage collection from GitLab. Not that the user interface or the functionality is that hard, but we probably just need to have some warnings in there. Like if they're, be careful if you have more than this amount of space, or I don't know, or maybe this only goes to self-managed users. So there's some considerations for how we handle it, and it probably depends on how effective we've optimized the garbage collection code. But this is definitely something that all of the other container registries have as part of their platform, where you have the ability to just set a schedule. You could say run automatically every N number of days or N number of minutes, and then just have it run. And then the next piece is another user interface piece. So the ability to set retention and expiration policies for container images. I was thinking that we could leverage the existing bulk removal API, either at the project or the group level. Although it sounds like part of that now that I understand some of the performance and functionality of the bulk removal API, that it sounds like that optimization will definitely need to happen before we consider doing this at a broader level, right?
Right.
Okay. And then another one is just being able to delete images or packages after merge. So we do this now, like when you submit a merge request, you have the option to delete the branch upon merge and squash your commits. Ian had this idea based on user research to just have an option, include the option to remove images or packages on merge as well. And that's definitely a use case that we would take advantage of, because in GitLab, every time any branch gets built, we are building a new Docker image, and that's getting added to the container registry, which is why we have over 2 petabytes of storage. So being able to maybe even have that as like a auto selected for test branches would be really valuable for us.
Yeah, Tim, could you do me a favor? Sorry if someone else was talking there. Could you move optimize container registry garbage collection command up, because it's like out of order right now. Sorry.
Yeah, I think everything got
we moved around a little bit, so no worries. But just wanted to make sure that was the right order. Thank you.
Then, yeah, so that's this epic. What do you all think? Open to feedback. Are we missing anything? Maybe we can go through now the notes and think about, is there any background information that's missing? Does anyone have any questions about why we chose that epic or any of those particular issues? No. Or the goal, is the goal clear of that and the scope of what we're trying to tackle?
So I think there's a couple of blocking items here that I think we could sort of move through at some level, because we need to start moving on this work, and because obviously it's extremely important, not only cost to GitLab, but also our customers. Some of our larger customers, as Tim mentioned, are dealing with a fairly large container registry, so this is important for everybody. I think that the slight blocking we have here is that we have a couple of question marks around how we actually, so we're optimizing the garbage collection algorithm they have in the code. Submitting that back to the to trunk, I guess is the word just keeps coming in my head because I can't think of a better reason, but the main project, that may not even go anywhere. So then how do we take our version of the container registry, our version of Docker distribution registry, and then deploy that internally? There's been a couple of conversations around some of these issues. So I think that's going to be something we have to figure out. If we do end up on our own fork, we're going to then have to start, updating it with any security updates that happen from the main repo, the main project. And so there's other work that goes along with this if we end up switching that way. My preference would be to contribute back to the main project, as Tim mentioned. The other sort of slight hindrance we have here is we're in the process of hiring a Go engineer, and this is all written in Go. Something I've been a little hesitant to do is sort of prioritize this work right up front when we don't have anyone on the team who's actively has a lot of experience writing Go, because that puts someone in a position of being responsible for something that they don't really know that well. I have every faith in our team to be able to figure it out, but it's still not ideal. So that's why we're sort of in the process of hiring a Go person. I think there's going to be a little bit of shuffling around with this work that will sort of slow it down a bit. And I would also say that some of the issues as you outlined them there, Tim, there's some dependencies in there that, for example, we talked about, so bulk delete is an example. One of the ideas of bulk delete is to just, run each delete of each, tag as an offline process rather than a sync process to help speed that whole thing up. If we did that, then we're sending a task in to delete a tag, and then even the image perhaps, which would be good value, or the blob, that would be good value. That could then be used to actually just do the work of scheduling a delete. You just schedule that job and it goes and runs exactly the same command. So there's some overlap here in some of this work that could be quite useful. But we're not going to really get a good handle on that until we start working through these issues to begin with. So I think that's kind of my main concern around DDR and, Docker Distribution Registry and the container registry and working through this. The implement inline garbage collection as the title of the issue, or online garbage collection as I'm calling it, that is going to be more involved. And I think the big question mark for me on that particular effort, which I think is really important, because we need that. Because even if we could help our customers who have large container registries, we still have 2 petabytes. So it doesn't matter how quick that's optimized, it's not going to happen. So we need it online. And then we need to sort of start thinking about how we do that. But whether there's a migration involved to a new version of the Docker distribution registry as the container registry, which would become the container registry at that point, how we migrate, what that looks like, whether we can upgrade, what that upgrade path looks like, and then the migration process, which is something we chatted with Camille about a long time ago, of do we just write a script that goes and gets them and pulls and pushes, which would be very slow and time consuming, but you would at least get everything that was tagged. And then once that happened, you could drop the old container registry. So there's some migration effort that needs to go in there as well, and considerations around how that happens. The other thing to consider there is, as we're migrating, we're likely going to have more data usage, not less. That's something to keep in mind. So we sort of have to, I think Maren brought that up a while ago when we chatted about it, so it's something to keep in mind. Those are most of my thoughts. I think we are also waiting for a couple of team members to join, engineers. So we'll have onboarding during this time that we're working through this. And then, we'll have people contributing more. So we'll hopefully be able to move a little bit quicker. But that does mean that we're not really, we don't have the full team yet. So it means that some of these things might take a bit longer than is ideal until we get people onboarded. So that's my brain dump. No one was asking questions, but I just wanted to throw that out there. But please, everyone, feel free to chime in if you have concerns or thoughts about this process.
Are we, in terms of the garbage collection process, are there any, I've been having this idea, just optimize it. which it's, I mean, and I've based that off of some of the public contributions I've seen of people trying to push back to Docker and saying it's like orders of magnitude faster. One, can we take that code that person contributed that was already like made it through all of Docker's checks but just was never merged? Is there any way that we could just like pull that into our project? And then two, is there anything that we could do logistically in how we actually break up garbage collection? Because right now it's like sweeping everything across. If we use gitlab.com, it's sweeping across all of gitlab.com. Is there ways that we could limit it? Like, don't look for any tags that are created in the past 30 days, or only look at certain projects or certain groups or certain instances. Is there any way that we could, is that another avenue to optimization that could exist?
I mean, generally speaking, I think that's possible given that it's a file system object. So it obviously has a creation date and the last update and those sorts of things. I wouldn't want to get too far in iterating on a solution that we're basically going to get rid of anyway. I definitely think it's worthwhile to help customers, and I'm totally can be convinced if people go, actually, no, this will be, if we looked at an issue like that and the team was like, yeah, this is like really easy to implement, and sure, yeah, totally. But I just think I would prefer to sort of do something that sort of gets the low-hanging fruit sorted out, and then, if we need to sort of iterate a bit more on that, which would totally be fine, and then start looking at online garbage collection, because I think that'll be a fairly involved effort. The way that Docker did that is they, I don't know the actual history of it, but the comparison of what DTR, Docker Trusted Registry, and Docker Distribution Registry do is that Docker Trusted Registry actually puts the manifest in a database so that they can be like deleted and cleaned up in real time, and it's not going to be, I mean, there are locks obviously, but it's not the same as a file system. So that means that you could do online garbage collection in Docker Trusted Registry. So, that path of how we go from what we have right now, which is all file system, to a database, Camille's done a great job of outlining how he thinks, obviously it's Camille, of how that would work. And so I would want to start chipping away at that work, because we know we have to go there, and just have to evaluate as we're going along whether our customers need something else to be able to clean up, because none of those smaller efforts are going to help GitLab.com. So to me, that's like, okay, let's make sure our customers can do what they need to do, and then let's start working on something that will help us, maybe at the same time.
Okay. I think the other concern I have now, just from this week, I learned about the bulk removal process and the performance and how it works. A lot of these ideas in this epic are built off of the idea that we could leverage the existing bulk removal APIs to do things like set retention and expiration policies. How do we de-risk that? And I know we're looking into the performance, but just from your feel, is it something that's feasible for us to leverage those APIs to build a UI for setting retention and expiration policies?
I mean, in theory, I don't want to hold myself out as an expert of the architecture of our monorepo or Docker Distribution Registry either. The work that Gigi was trying to do to allow us to actually like replace images with dummy images, in theory, that could totally be used to clean this stuff up. And if we had an offline process that wasn't like, taking hours and days to do the work that we would need to do, that's fine. I think that could possibly form the basis. I don't see any reason why we couldn't have scheduled tasks created in Rescue or whatever process we're using to do that. If I run a pipeline and I've got a sort of a retention time of a week for something created from a pipeline, maybe it's in the one of our configuration files, then maybe schedule a task for that. And again, I'm not an expert on that on the monorepo's architecture, but that seems like a fairly simple ask. And that is built on, hey, we should put the bulk delete as a background process, because synchronously it just takes too long because the API response is too slow from Docker Distribution Registry. So I could see all that fitting together right now.
Okay.
Steve, maybe you've had a bit more experience with the way Rescue works or not. Feel free to just say no if you haven't.
I mean, yes and no. Like, I have experience, but not necessarily, you know, a deep understanding of whether or not that's how things would go.
Thanks. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I thought, you know, Rescue itself is just an offline task execution engine. So in
I want to
theory, we could schedule.
I want to put Steve on the spot. I feel like you were about to say something, or you're noodling, or it seemed like you're noodling or about to say something. So were you thinking? Did you have something in mind?
Um, I think the only thing I was thinking was a while back when we were going down that list, the goals. So you have listed as the outcomes of reducing storage costs. Should there also be an outcome of either, you know, of reducing the time it takes to do garbage collection, or the
That's a really
ability
good
to
point.
take things offline?
Okay, it takes to. Yeah, I'll add that in. So reducing the amount of time it takes to untag images and run garbage collection. Okay. What do you think, Nico, is coming in with a new perspective and maybe thinking about other systems that have these problems where they have to maintain, you have to manage storage and do things like garbage collection and expiration. Does this seem like anything's missing, or that we should be talking about a different, anything different?
Well, the thing that comes to my mind is not exactly from like garbage collection or maintaining big registry, but is the I think this is a common problem that there is a lot of sometimes we work on a lot of heavy lifting on backend side or algorithmic side. And my question is, did we maybe try to think of any piece of UI that is maybe simple to build but can add value in this way? For example, I don't know, having the table be searchable, highlight whatever is very old, or highlight which kind of uh, uh, images are not used, and so that the user can simply go in and easily detect visually what is stale or what is not using and remove it manually. I know that that's not the final solution, but sometimes it's much easier to build, and it relies on the human on the other side and just empowering them to uh, actually detect this kind of stuff. I don't
That's
know if this is viable, yes or no, but
Well, what's interesting, what made me think of that is when we spoke to Harbor, they do not support online garbage collection, but they haven't had the same problem for their customers because they've always had this retention and expiration policy and the ability to just run garbage collection and schedule it from the beginning. So they didn't see the same ballooning cost or in storage. So that's definitely one side of it. The other side, what you're mentioning, is a little bit more complicated in this case because of the way that we handle the UI. We actually are not persisting the data in a database. It's one thing Dan mentioned a minute ago. So everything that shows up in the container registry UI is an API call to Docker registry.
mm-hmm.
And so that page has a lot of limitations. We can't implement things like sorting or filtering because of the way it's implemented. Basically, maybe Dan could talk about that in a bit more depth if he wants.
Yeah, I mean, that might be worth adding actually, Tim, to the Epic as issues if you felt like it was worthwhile. Would be, you know, because if we do take over and we start using our own fork, then we would want to add those sorts of things. You know, paging through API calls and sorting the API responses, and then ultimately we're just going to build a schema that supports all of that inside our normal data store, if that makes sense, or make calls across to a different schema for container registry. But yeah, Tim's explanation was pretty accurate. You know, when we make a call, anything that you see on the page is effectively going through an API call and response, which is why if you saw the issue, you may not have had a chance to see it yet. But there's a discussion around how do we do ordering in a way that's helpful for our customers. And there's this like, when we get to 15, then it won't work, because then you go to another page and then the ordering goes away. So the ordering is never going to work. Because as you know, you pull a response back, you've got the objects in, you know, JSON or a dictionary or whatever, and you can order it however you want on the front end, but your next call won't reflect that order. So that's kind of why we have that issue right now. Keeping in mind that, you know, this solution that we have is considered what's the product term?
Viable.
Yeah, so it's viable, but what that means is we implemented a few years ago a Docker distribution registry, built a shim in the API in the mono repo to actually interact with those APIs, and then not a whole lot else has been done. And to call out just on what Tim said around Harbor and the way they implemented it, I mean, that's if we had the scheduling and the auto deleting sort of stuff in place at the outset, we probably wouldn't have ended up with 2 petabytes. I mean, we probably have a lot of stuff because we do have a lot of things that are necessarily there. The little gap we have there is, even if we implemented that tomorrow, we still have a whole bunch of stuff in the container registry that is being stored that we don't really know the state of it, which is why it's kind of like, okay, how do we clean this up in a way that makes sense? I think you call out of like looking what can we empower our users to do. I think it's a great call out. So I don't mean any of this to suggest shut that conversation down, because it's a great conversation to have, and we really appreciate any thoughts you have around that. As a team, finding solutions for our customers is obviously our priority here. So thank you for bringing that up.
And it does lead me to the next epic, which I think we'll get to next week, which is creating visibility and transparency for our stage for the package and container registry. And we'll go over it next week, but I'll just touch on quickly. This is what right now Ian is sort of out front doing user research. We have a survey out talking about why do people come to the GitLab package registry UI or the container registry UI? What are they looking for? What data are they expecting? What functionality are they expecting there? And so we're working on some new designs for that, which hopefully will help as much as possible with those things. So that we'll review more next week, some of the issues that we have planned there. I actually did not, I took sorting out of that list because I thought it was a little too risky. That one I'm more focusing on the metadata that we include and ensuring that, like, I think to build on what Dan was saying, we built basically our container registry using Docker DDR, Docker registry. What's the second D for?
Distribution.
Docker for, I haven't had enough coffee yet. Docker distribution registry. And it looks very much like Docker Hub. If you go to our UI, it's like, it looks almost, it's very similar to, we're displaying the same information, but we're not Docker Hub, we're GitLab. And as part of that, we need to build something that makes sense for us. And I think a big part of that is making sure that we're giving contextual help. We're showing how an image was built, by whom, what, was it built with CI? If so, which pipeline or which job? If it comes from a Docker file, what commit, where does that Docker file live? So really, I think that's going to really make our product much more useful for our users. And I'm really excited about that next epic as well, because now it feels like, I always think about things in terms of value steps. Like the first thing that we could do is just give people a way to build and publish images. And then the next thing we have to do is give them a way to delete them. Well, now when we start to get to this creating visibility and rethinking the UI and building something that makes sense for GitLab, that starts to get on this extra level of value, where now we're actually not just giving users the functionality, we're helping them improve the process of building and publishing code.
Yeah, I think this is something we talked about a little while ago. I think Tim a couple of times, and having Ian here and Nico having a conversation about what's the GitLab way to do this? Do we care about these artifacts? And artifacts is a used word, so I don't want to use that. But do we care about these images? Where do they go? How long do they live for? Do we need our users to be involved in that if our users have an understanding of what that means? So, like, if I run a pipeline and it produces an image or a tag, whatever, and the pipeline finishes and it's successful and they merge it all, do they need it anymore? Like, should we even have a user be involved? Like, what would be the point? And is that something we need to actually look at and care about? I mean, and yeah, we give options, but, you know, MVC, minimal viable change, maybe it makes sense to just automatically delete those things when the branch goes away, as Tim sort of mentioned earlier, more than it does sort of leaving it hanging around for X days because we have an expiration policy. But that depends on, you know, user research that Ian's doing, which is awesome. And so when we find out what our priorities are, maybe everyone uses CI the most, that's where most of it comes from. Maybe it makes just sense once they merge that pipeline that the whole thing goes away. And that's like the easiest path there. But there's lots of cool problems to solve here. There's a big pile of them, so it can be kind of stressful. But it's awesome that we get to solve a bunch of these problems because it's almost like we're doing something from scratch in a company that's totally not from scratch, right? Like, so we have the support of a big org and lots of peers and awesome people to work with, but at the same time we get to solve these very basic problems that are super fun. So go, Steve.
Yeah, so one thing that just crossed my mind, and I might just like be like thinking too much in general, but the idea of reducing the costs for GitLab's registry by 20% within this epic. So if we don't include online garbage collection within this epic, would that still reduce the cost by that on GitLab if we're unable to do garbage collection? Because even if we can remove the tags, I think the underlying blobs never get garbage collected, and those are the big space takers.
That's an excellent point. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think what I was getting at before, Steve, and that's an awesome call out. Thank you. What I was getting at before is the work that Gigi was doing on cleaning up, replacing a blob with a dummy blob. That actually goes to solve that problem of reducing actual costs. And that was my understanding of the work he was doing. I think he said in one of his recent updates that he's kind of going back to that. There was a bunch of feedback on it. But you're 100% correct. If we just untag something, the storage doesn't go away. So that's totally a thing that we should be aware of. Thank you for that.
Cool. Just want to make sure I wasn't not understanding things properly.
Okay, we are at time. I wanted to say one more thing, which is that I really want these meetings to be useful. I feel like I talked a lot today, which is maybe okay for now, but I want it to be much more. I want us to all feel like we're contributing to this vision and get to the point where we're, you know, it becomes much more of a discussion. So I'm very interested in making sure these meetings feel useful and that we're respecting people's time. So I'm going to just send out a short survey, just asking a few questions like, was this effective? Did the agenda work? Just because I want to continue to improve to make sure that we can keep these discussions going and useful. So I'd appreciate it when you have time, if you could fill it out, that would be great. So I'll end on time, and Dan mentioned we might stick around and have a brief follow-up discussion. So I'm going to stop the recording. Thanks, everyone.